assistant professor at Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest, Hungary, and in spring 2026 I'm a visiting fellow here at the center at PIT. So I mainly work in philosophy of physics, and while at the center I'm mostly thinking about what is known as the principle of common cause. So briefly put, what this principle states is that there is no correlation without causal explanation. More specifically, if there is a correlation between two events in the world, then according to this principle, either one of those events must have a causal influence on the other, or there must exist a third event, a common cause, that influences both of those correlated events. Now, there's a huge literature on this subject, mainly focusing on cases where this principle might fail. Now, what I do with this principle is a bit different. It is not so much about the principle itself, rather it is about other topics looked at through the lens of the principle of common cause. So these other topics include general themes in philosophy of science, such as what is probability and randomness, the problem of reduction and emergence, the origin of the direction of time, the concept of modality, the problem of realism. So what I find myself doing in the last few years is that I'm thinking about these themes in terms of the common cause principles statement. So to give you a more concrete example of what this means, let's take the problem of reduction. So people speak about the levels of the special sciences. So there's physics, and then there's chemistry, and then there's biology, there's psychology, and there are the social sciences. So when these levels are not unrelated. In a way, physics is the most fundamental of all of these levels. Right? There's a sense in which all biological, psychological, social events are dependent on physical events. And then people wonder about the nature of this dependence relationship. So people often speak about in terms of one level being reducible to the other, one level being grounded in the other, one level emerging out of another level. Right? So these words are floating around. But one thing seems for sure. So if there is any sense in which biological events, say, depend on physical events, then there must exist a statistical correlation between physical events and biological events in some ensemble of events that are described both by physics and biology. And then this correlation, according to the common cause principles demand, cries out for some sort of explanation. And then one can describe the relationship between these levels in terms of the possible explanation for this interlevel correlation allowed by the principle of common cause. Right? So that's one example where one looks at a specific problem in philosophy of science, say, through the lens of an idea, here the common cause principle. So my main project at the center is to put these investigations side by side and arrange them into some sort of coherent narrative, perhaps into a book of some sort. So if I manage to write this book, I think the title would make some reference to the saying, if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail, which is exactly how one of my colleagues in Budapest described my work, slightly dismissively, but quite accurately, actually. And indeed, this reference highlights a little bit this Kantian theme that we all look at the world through the filters of some ideas, conceptions, principles. And what I like to underline with these investigations, that what you get out after these filters can still be objective and correct, hopefully. so I hope to drive in as many nails as possible with my hammer while at the center.